morning. I'm delighted to have you. Is it possible to ask you to introduce yourself in your own words?
My name is Akinwumi Adesina. I am president of the African Development Bank.
Can you tell me why is this COP27 important for you?
Well, it is important for me because of the continent I represent. The continent I represent and that we finance, Africa, suffers disproportionately from the impact of climate change. The continent of Africa contributes only 3% historically of all the emissions, but it suffers a lot. Take a look at it today. $7 to $15 billion is what Africa loses every year from climate change. If we don't change that, it will grow to $50 billion a year by 2030. Well, the fact of the matter is that we didn't cause the problem, but we need the resources to adapt to the problems. And so this COP for me is an adaptation COP. We at the African Development Bank, have put up a $25 billion program with the Global Center on Adaptation called African Adaptation Acceleration Program to support Africa's adaptation efforts, okay? We've also opening within the African Development Fund, which is the concessional lending arm of the bank, what's called a climate action window to mobilize up to $13 billion for adaptation for Africa. We need the resources. For us at the African Development Bank, we already now devote 67% of all of our climate finance to adaptation. And UN Secretary General Guterres was very effusive about that to commend us because that's the highest you will find in the world in terms of adaptation. So this COP is the Africa COP, and if it's the Africa COP, it should focus on Africa's main issue, which is adaptation. Yeah. And I'm very excited that we had a program here, a leaders dialogue on the African Adaptation Acceleration Program. UN Secretary General was there, global leaders were there. The UK government came through and provided £200 million to the African Development Bank. The government of Netherlands came through and provided 110 million euros towards our efforts on adaptation. So this Africa COP is all about adaptation, and I'm encouraged by what I'm saying.
If it's an adaptation COP, is it also an implementation one? Because do you think that this time around, the North will listen to the South and they're going to walk the talk?
Well, there are two ways in which I look at that. We have no choice but to actually act. We have to act at a different levels. First and foremost, the developed countries that have caused all of the havoc with all the emissions have to walk the talk. We still need $100 billion a year of climate financing promised since a long time ago to developing countries. That money has to be on the table. Megawatts of talk have to be translated into megawatts of financing. So that's the first thing. Secondly, we also have to be quite deliberate in terms of how we support local efforts within our own countries to get private sector and globally to finance climate finance. Look, today we have globally $130 trillion of assets under management. You can just imagine, if we get 0.04% of that, that will be enough to close all of Africa's infrastructure gap and do it in a way that is climate resilient. And finally, is the fact that we also have to understand that our countries in Africa, they need renewable energy. They need to be able to have climate resilient infrastructure. It's very expensive stuff. What they need is not more loans. What they need is a lot more grants, because why am I taking a lot of loans to deal with consequences of what you have caused?
Indeed. And what would be a successful COP for you? What do you intend to achieve for Africa?
A successful COP for us already is turning quite successful for us, is to be able to mobilize a lot of resources for the African Adaptation Acceleration Program, which is Africa's own program. It's the largest program for adaptation in the world. And so, with the UK government commitment, with that of Netherlands and several other, Prime Minister of Norway was there and several others, I believe we'll be able to get that done. The second thing, which will make it also a great success for us, is to make sure that efforts are put to concretize the $100 billion promised by, it has to be delivered, because 85% of what Africa said it was going to do in its nationally determined contributions are conditional on the $100 billion. So if you want us to do it, also put the money on the ground. But the African Development Bank is fully committed to making sure that we can mobilize resources at scale. And I'm very encouraged with the direction we are going, even though we still have to do more.
Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.